they never stop when it came to Trump, when they should have stopped? Why did they never slow down? Because they had a bias. They really were in the tank when it came to Trump being a Russian agent. No matter what the evidence said, they were going after this guy because in their mind he wasn't worthy. Why did they not look at the allegations against candidate Clinton provided by the CIA? It would undercut the narrative. This wasn't an investigation that was unbiased. This was an investigation that was out of control. The people in charge of it were deeply biased. Their actions proved more than any direct evidence of their bias. Every time they had a moment to reflect, they moved forward. Every time exculpatory information was provided, they ignored it or altered it criminally. It's no accident it's no accident, in my view, that all this happened. This is not a series of random mistakes. This was a concerted effort to keep an investigation going that should have stopped, that should have slowed down. And what's the damage done? They manipulated the FISA court to keep a warrant process going that should have stopped months ago. They created a cloud over the FBI about political bias that lingers to this day. Lawyers are being prosecuted for manipulating evidence to keep a warrant application alive. They were told about information from the CIA that maybe this was all part of a political scheme of the opponent. They ignored it. They knew that the Christopher Steele dossier was suspect. They knew that the source was a prior suspected Russian agent, and they kept going and going and going. And they never at one moment gave President Trump a briefing that every other candidate should expect. If you think somebody in my office is doing something wrong, I would like for you to tell me so I can fix it. They weren't trying to protect Trump. They weren't trying to protect his campaign from foreign influence. They were trying to undercut the president. They were trying to keep an investigation going against a candidate they despised. They had one standard for Trump, vastly different than that of candidate Clinton. And my Democratic colleagues say, let's move on. To this day, years later, I've yet to find one person who will take responsibility for manipulating the FISA court. I didn't know. If I knew then what I know now, I wouldn't have signed it. So who are we to blame? Is it somebody at the bottom of the pyramid who had all this exculpatory information and for some reason didn't share it? Is that what the system's come down to? Blaming somebody at the bottom? They take responsibility in name only. They don't seem to appreciate the gravity of damage done to the FBI and to the investigative process when they say, no, of course I wouldn't have signed that warrant. These are the people, Comey and McCabe, not Rosenstein and Yates, who are actually in charge of gathering the information. They're in charge of the investigative part of obtaining a FISA warrant. They gather the facts, and the lawyers at DOJ decide whether or not to pursue a warrant. The people in charge of this investigation were notified by the CIA that this may have been a plot cooked up by the Democratic candidate to blame Trump for being involved in Russia when he wasn't. They completely ignored it. And when they were hit hard by the facts that the dossier was a bunch of garbage, it just magically never made it up to their desk. Everything bad about Trump made it to their desk. Everything exculpatory about the Trump campaign never made it to their desk. How dumb do they think we are? This committee is not through. We're going to keep digging until we find out how the most high-profile investigation of a candidate for president of the United States and eventually a sitting president was handled so poorly, and try to let the FISA court know that we take our job seriously. So we will continue this process. People need to be fired, and I think the criminality here needs to be looked at. I find it very difficult to believe that this exculpatory information was not withheld from the court on purpose. We know Klein Smith changed exculpatory information. We caught him. There's somebody else out there that probably knows. The system rejected the exculpatory information. They just didn't ignore it. To be continued. Thank you. Hearing is adjourned.
And failed to find any derogatory information about General Flynn and determined he was no longer a viable candidate for investigation. But then, according to Peter Strzok, the seventh floor, the top brass at the FBI intervened to keep the investigation open. Were you the one who made the decision to keep the investigation open?
I don't remember making that decision, but I certainly supported keeping the case open. I don't remember being the person that made that phone call, but I think that it was the right move to continue investigating once we had uncovered the information that we found.
So despite the fact that the career investigators concluded that there was no basis and no derogatory information and recommended closing it, you made the decision, or at least you agreed with the decision to keep the investigation open on what basis?
Well, I don't know that, I don't recall that the investigators determined there was no basis to continue. My recollection from the conversations we were having about the Flynn case.
The memo is a memo to close the investigation because it could not find any, quote, derogatory information about Flynn, and he was, quote, no longer a viable candidate for investigation. That's not ambiguous, is it?
No, that's not the same as what you said before. And I, of course, don't have that memo in front of me, but our feeling at that time was that we had found very little if any, incriminating evidence about General Flynn, until, of course, we found potentially very incriminating evidence about him.
Are you referring to the Logan Act theory?
No, sir. I'm referring to the fact that we uncovered that General Flynn was having the sort of direct contact with the government of Russia that we were looking for in all of the first four cases of Crossfire Hurricane.
Did you support using the Logan Act as a basis to go after General Flynn?
The Logan Act was not used as a basis to go after General Flynn. We opened the case.
You're aware of the White House meeting where the notes show that Vice President Biden at the time directly suggested using the Logan Act to go after General Flynn?
I'm not aware of that.
You're not aware of that. Well, those are notes from your colleagues.
I don't mean to interrupt, but
Senator, Senator, I can say what the reasons that I agreed with and approved opening the case, and that was because we thought that General Flynn might be having inappropriate contacts with Russia. That's why we opened the case.
Inappropriate. So the only basis, this is a decorated three-star general. The only basis that was put forward for what I think was a bogus political persecution and prosecution was an alleged violation of the Logan Act, which has never been used to prosecute anybody in the history of the Department of Justice. True?
No, I don't believe that's true. I think if you
name one person that's ever been prosecuted under the Logan Act.
No, I was referring to why we opened the case against General Flynn. I'm not aware of prosecutions of the Logan Act.
I think for those who are listening, we're talking about a conversation between General Flynn and the Russian ambassador after the election, while he's the national security advisor in waiting. Is that correct, Senator Cruz?
We are. He's the incoming national security advisor. And Mr. McCabe, yesterday on MSNBC, Ben Rhodes, the former deputy national security advisor to President Obama, said that foreign leaders are already having conversations with Joe Biden, quote, talking about the agenda they're going to pursue January 20th. Mr. McCabe, based on that testimony, do you believe Joe Biden is violating the Logan Act?
I'm not aware of Ben Rhodes' statements or
take it on faith he said what I read. Assuming that quote is accurate, and it's a verbatim quote, is that a violation of the Logan Act under any plausible theory?
I am not prepared to take your statement on faith. And I am also not prepared to conduct legal analysis.
All right, you're a lawyer. Have you ever answered a hypothetical in court? If it is correct that I am accurately quoting it, something the Department of Justice frequently did wrong, in this investigation. If that is what Ben Rhodes said, if Joe Biden is talking with foreign leaders right now, does it violate the Logan Act? Yes or no?
I'm not going to opine on a hypothetical question about what the Biden campaign
He is
might
talking
or
with
might
foreign leaders, and it doesn't violate the Logan Act because the Logan Act is unconstitutional, which is why it's never been used to prosecute anyone. You authorized using it to go after General Flynn as part of a political persecution. I can give you the answer. Hell no, Joe Biden is not violating the Logan Act. The reason you won't say it is because that was your flimsy political basis to go after a decorated war hero because you disagreed politically with President Trump.
Sir, none of that is correct.
Which part? Pick any aspect.
We didn't investigate General Flynn because we were concerned that he might violate the Logan Act. We were concerned that
your testimony, the Logan Act was not a predicate for the FBI and DOJ investigation of General Flynn. Really?
There were no discussions of the Logan Act. The best of my recollection.
There were no discussions of the Logan Act at the FBI or DOJ. That is your testimony under penalty of perjury before this committee.
Senator,
and I warn you, there is abundant evidence that there were.
Senator, if you're not going to let me finish my answer, I'm not going to be able to accurately answer your question.
Please go ahead. What is your testimony? Is your testimony, you just said there was no discussion of the Logan Act. Does that remain your testimony?
No, Senator, that's where you cut off my testimony.
Please continue.
I would like to finish my answer.
Please continue.
Thank you. When we initiated the case against General Flynn, it was not initiated for or as a result of any discussion of the Logan Act.
You're being non-responsive to the question. I didn't ask about the initiation. The Logan Act was a late pretext that was adopted after you investigated him and couldn't find anything, and the career investigators recommended closing it. All right, since my time is expiring, although the chairman took a little bit of my time, so I'm going to take a little bit of it back. Did James Comey authorize you to disclose information about the Clinton Foundation investigation to the press?
I didn't need James Comey's authorization.
I didn't ask if you needed it. I asked, did he authorize you to disclose it? That's a yes or no question.
I authorized the disclosure of that
You're
material.
still not answering my question. Did James Comey know about it, and did he authorize it? Yes or no? Did he know about it?
To my recollection, sir, yes, he knew about it.
Did he authorize you? Did he in any way give you the green light explicitly or implicitly?
I didn't ask Jim Comey.
I'm not asking whether you asked. I'm asking, okay, according to the Washington Times, April 18th, 2018, Mr. McCabe insisted he told his boss that he had authorized disclosure about the Clinton investigation, but Mr. Comey has denied this claim. And Mr. McCabe told investigators that Mr. Comey knew he had authorized disclosure and agreed it was a good idea. Is that accurate? Is that your testimony to this committee?
That is my recollection.
So you're aware that your testimony is 180 degrees opposite Mr. Comey's sworn testimony to this committee, in which he insisted he has never authorized anybody to leak to the press.
I'm not going to say what Director Comey said or didn't say to you. That would, however, your characterization of a leak is
our CIA sends an investigative lead over to the FBI. And they informed the FBI of U.S. presidential candidate Hillary Clinton's approval of a plan concerning U.S. presidential candidate Donald Trump and Russian hackers hampering U.S. elections as a means of distracting the public from her use of a private mail service. How many agents were assigned to investigate that?
Senator, if you are referring to the memorandum, the raw intelligence memorandum recently declassified by the DNI.
Yeah.
I have read that memorandum, and I don't understand it to be a request for investigative activity. I'm not aware that any agents were assigned to investigate the information.
Wait a minute, time out. You get a memo, an investigative lead is what the CIA calls it. alleging that Hillary Clinton had just signed off on a plan to tie Trump to Russia for political purposes. How many people looked at that? How many agents were assigned to see if it was true or not? Did you know about it? Did you know about it?
I was not aware of that memorandum.
Wait a minute. Time out. You get a CIA memo, investigative lead memo, suggesting that the Democratic candidate for president, Hillary Clinton, is trying to divert attention from her email server problem by casting aspersions against the Trump campaign being connected to Russia, and you didn't know about it. How is that possible?
Senator, I'd like to explain to you how that's possible.
Who did it go to? Who did it go to? I will. I just want to make sure if he understands who it went to. Who did the memo go to?
I read the memo recently. My understanding it went to Director Comey and was also to the attention of Peter Strzok. That memorandum that you're referring to, as I read it, is in response to an FBI request, oral request, for an update of the sort of information that the Crossfire Hurricane Task Force was reviewing about Russian activity in the campaign. That's from my best recollection. That's what the
I'm here to tell you that that's not what happened. Is that the CIA, and we've got the documents, sent to the FBI information suggesting that Hillary Clinton had approved of a plan to link Donald Trump to Russia for political purposes, and it went to Peter Strzok. Do you believe Peter Strzok was fair-minded when it came to the Trump campaign?
Senator, my experience is working with Peter Strzok. Yes, I believe he was fair in the decisions that he made and the work that he did.
So do you object to Mueller relieving him from the investigation because of the emails show that he hated Trump's guts?
My recollection, sir, is that we removed Peter from that team because of the ongoing investigation.
Did you remove him, or did Mueller remove him?
We had conversations on the evening that I was first shown the text messages between Mr. Strzok and Ms. Page, and we made the decision to remove him, and we reached out to Director Mueller's team, and they agreed with that. That's my recollection.
So you believe that Peter Strzok was on the up and up. Was it ever suggested to you by Mr. Precept that Mr. Strzok should not be involved in this investigation because of his relationship with Lisa Page?
Senator, I remember discussing with both Mr. Precept and Mr. Steinbach.
So here's
probably
here are the facts. Precept suggests that Strzok not be involved. You overrode him. And here's what we know about Strzok and Page. Page, March 3rd, 2016. God, Trump is a loathsome human. Oh my God, Strzok. Trump's an idiot. He's awful. Strzok. God, Hillary should win 100 million to nothing. August 2016. Page, he's not ever going to become president, right? Strzok. No, he won't. We'll stop it. So is it your testimony under oath that you think Peter Strzok had no biases against Trump?
Senator, it is my testimony under oath that the work that I saw Peter Strzok do on the Crossfire case and on other cases.
Why didn't he tell you?
Indicate any.
Go ahead.
Senator, I'm having a hard time finishing an answer. I don't know if it's
please finish.
Connection or what? But.
Please finish.
So I was simply stating that the work that I saw Peter do on this case and other cases, from that work and the decisions he made, I did not see any indications of political bias.
How do you explain to the American people that when the FBI received a memo from the CIA alleging that Hillary Clinton had signed off on a plan concerning U.S. Presidential Donald Trump, and Russia hackers hampering U.S. elections as a means of distracting the public from our use of a private mail service, that you did nothing. Should Peter Strzok have told you about this?
I can't explain to you, Senator, what Peter Strzok or Director Comey thought about that memo at that time.
Should you have been notified?
What I can say, Senator,
wait a minute.
is
No,
that,
wait a minute.
I
No,
mean,
no,
the-
please, please. I want to get into this. Everybody is saying that you had the right to open up an investigation against Trump based on the U.S. ambassador, the Australian ambassador to the United Kingdom, who heard a conversation in a bar. What you're telling this committee, when the CIA informs the FBI about a plan signed off by Hillary Clinton to link Trump to Russia, nothing was done. Is that what you're saying? There was no investigation of that allegation at all?